Hi folks, the Troubles podcast is back for season 4. It's great to be back. I'm hoping to have a heavier focus on interviews this season, but there will also be plenty of regular episodes mixed in as well. Just a quick thank you to all the people who reached out in the off-season with emails and messages, and especially the Patreons. It was great to hear from fans of the podcast, and it really helps encourage me to continue making this podcast. Anyway, let's get into the episode. It was early in the morning of August 10th, 1971, when the British Army launched Operation Demetrius. This saw them picking up hundreds of individuals who were suspected of being involved in the IRA. The men were picked up and then would spend the next few months in Northern Irish prisons. It was a fairly grim experience, especially as most of those picked up had nothing to do with paramilitary activity, as the intel that the British Army had used was inaccurate and out of date. To be swooped up and arrested for no reason was a significant event in itself, but for 14 individuals, things were quite different. And today, over 50 years later, the question of torture still hangs in the air. This is the story of the Hooded Men. This is the Troubles podcast, a podcast which explores the violence and bloodshed that occurred in Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, and Great Britain, as multiple sides waged a bloody conflict over the status of Northern Ireland. By 1971 in Northern Ireland, the British Army had been deployed in the country since 1969. Their deployment was initially welcomed by the nationalist population of Northern Ireland, who believed that they would keep them safe from attacks by the Northern Irish Police Force, the RUC. This relationship quickly soured, and it was also around this time that the IRA split into the Provisionals and the Officials. The Provisionals launched a guerrilla campaign against the armed forces, whereas the Officials didn't exactly believe in all-out warfare. As the Provisional IRA grew in power, the Northern Irish government, under the leadership of Prime Minister Brian Faulkner, wanted to deal a significant blow to the Provisional IRA and wipe them out completely. So the idea of internment was thought up. Internment would help reduce the power of the Provisional IRA and also show to the Unionists that the government was taking action to hopefully prevent a loyalist backlash. Strangely enough, it was the British government who suggested a balancing action to Faulkner, saying that he should also target loyalist militants. But in Faulkner's eyes, loyalists, quote, did not represent an immediate and serious threat to the security of the state or the criminal justice system. That being said, the loyalist UVF had been carrying out a number of petrol bombings, shootings and bombings by this stage, so to the Republicans, internment would go on to be perceived as an extremely prejudiced action by the army. Over the 9th and 10th of August 1971, Operation Demetrius, aka internment, began. There are many accounts of how these arrests occurred. In many cases, soldiers burst into people's homes unannounced, families were assaulted and verbally abused. 342 people were arrested over this 2-day period. They were then brought to holding centres for a number of days, before eventually being brought to a prison, where many ended up spending as much as a year behind bars, without ever being convicted of a crime. In the wake of these mass arrests, violence broke out across Belfast and Derry, and it was during this period that the Ballymurphy massacre occurred, which is covered in an earlier episode. As well as that, a number of Protestant families fled from their homes in the Ardoyne area of Belfast and burned their houses down as they went, so as to prevent Catholic families from moving in. Catholic families also fled from Protestant areas, and around 2,500 people fled across the border into the Republic of Ireland into refugee camps. Thus, a crude settling of the sides occurred when it came to nationalist and unionist families in many parts of Belfast and Derry. Conditions for those interned were quite severe, with many men complaining that they were starved, beaten, threatened with dogs, or forced to run a gauntlet with soldiers on either side of them, kicking them. But for 14 men, conditions were about to become significantly more severe. It's at this point I'll be passing the story over to Jim Auld, a native of Belfast. I drove up to his house in early 2022 and was warmly welcomed by him and his wife. We had a coffee together, and then I set up my recording equipment, and Jim recounted to me the darkest 7 days of his life. We had a long conversation, and I've left the full conversation in here, to give an understanding of the world in which he grew up, and how he eventually ended up being targeted by the British Army. It's rare to get the chance to sit down and actually speak to a primary source, and someone who has actually lived through internment. In the first episode, we will learn about Jim's early life and what things were like once the hood was slipped over his head. Then, in the second episode, we will learn about what happened to Jim after he was hooded and the complicated legal case surrounding the hooded men. The second part of this episode will be released later this month, but right now you can listen to the entire episode over on patreon.com/The Troubles Podcast. So if you'd like to support the podcast, you can do so over there. Just a heads up, you'll also hear my voice in the background. It's a bit quiet, so I'll be sure to mic up for the next interview. Now, let's pass things over to Jim.
Okay, I'm 71-year-old now. I have lived most of my life in Belfast. I was born in Belfast. I was born on the Falls Road in an estate called Beachmount, which is probably about halfway up the Falls Road. I had probably, I would call it the perfect upbringing. Mother and father, brothers and sisters, never any bother from anybody or for anybody. And that was all of us. My father was a bookmaker's clerk, and he was always worked all his days. I never remember him being unemployed. We all did half decent at school, in that we all finished school and we all had jobs. When I was 16, I started working as an apprentice dental technician, and I was getting on well. I had no bother from
this would have been around mid-60s.
60s, yeah.
So it would have been a time where maybe a lot of families, there was huge unemployment, I guess. Right?
Yeah, there was unemployment, and I think that I was just starting to realise that there was such a thing as sectarianism.
Okay.
Because in a couple of the places that I worked, there was unease in some of the places, not from me, but from other Catholics who worked in the place, who experienced it. I think I was a young fella and naive and didn't understand it, and it was them that started talking to me about.
So you're saying people started to feel like the sense of being discriminated at.
Yeah.
They were Catholics worked for Protestants.
Yes.
Suddenly they felt.
Yeah, uneasy because they were relating things that were starting to happen. I remember the first political thing that I remember was being at a march on the Falls Road in 1964, and that was when Sinn Féin put a banner, a tricolour up in a shop, as it was their election headquarters, and they were standing in an election, and the RUC came in and smashed the place up and ripped the flag out. I know that on that day there were. It was the first large gathering of people that I had ever experienced. In fact, I was about 14 at the time, and there was a big fella that who was older than he was the brother of a friend of mine, and he actually carried me on his shoulders as part of the march, and it was the first time that I experienced real physical bother from the cops.
Yeah.
Other than the cops on motorbikes used to come round if you were standing about or playing football. He used to have a stick down his leg of his boots, and he used to smack you with the stick to get off the road or get you out of the way. But I remember, and there's another thing that sticks in my head because it was so similar to it, and that was I was on this fella's shoulders, and the crowd started running, and he and with me on his shoulders fell. And as we fell, there was a cop with a blackthorn stick came running towards us as part of a charge from the cops to break up the crowd, and he smacked me across the back with the walking stick. And I mean, I wasn't doing anything other than being there. It was a bit of crack for me. It was, it was, there was no, I hadn't a political thought in my head. It was just as part of this march. That's it was the Sinn Féin election place that was being was the focus of the march, but politics for me was an unknown.
Random violence, basically.
Yeah, and it was to get rid of it was, and it was that was. But there was in the middle of the Falls Road, knew nothing about the politics, and there I was getting beaten by a cop, and I always remember. I always look at it in the same terms as there's a famous sequence of you see it on television on a regular basis about an old time cop or you see man beating somebody with a stick while he's on the ground in Dungannon at some of the first civil rights marches. And it's very similar to me as what happened. And that guy that he was beating was similarly totally innocent. It was just over the top. I'm saying that, and I'm acknowledging that I knew nothing about it at all. And to say that I was there to support Sinn Féin isn't right. I was there as an excited kid going on something that was different, and that everybody on the Falls Road was there.
I then asked Jim if he ever felt discriminated against for being a Catholic while growing up in Northern Ireland.
I really didn't. I honestly didn't know what discrimination was until I started working and other Catholics started pointing out, that there were Protestants in the firms that were being treated differently to us, and we were being made to do more, made to do dirtier work, treated less and got less wages, anything at all that was one step below what Protestants were. And I'm saying I was totally naive and didn't know that.
Yeah, well, you don't know if you don't see the other side.
I don't see it.
You just do your own thing.
Other than that, but that was my first. I mean, venturing into work was my first experience of Protestants.
Yeah.
Because I'm saying I grew up in the middle of the Falls Road. All my friends and neighbours were all Catholic. There was I had no contact with Protestants, and later on when we started going into dances in the town, we met Protestants, Protestant girls. Never any bother at all with them, and back then we left Protestant girls home and get on dead on with them. Now
it was the era of the show bands.
And there was no difficulty. We get on as normal.
That's what the likes
16, 17, 18-year-olds do.
That's like what the likes of Miami used to always say.
Yeah.
Like any of their shows, there was no even the band themselves were mixed Catholic and Protestant. They never really had any sort of they didn't see discrimination the way it was being seen at the time. Because, like I said, you're the age you are. You just want to go out and enjoy your life. That's
all I and my friends were doing.
Yeah.
No different from anybody. We felt no different from anybody else.
Yeah.
It was around the 1969, I think, was probably the starting point. 68, the 68. The politics started, rearing its head. And there was, incursions into nationalist areas, and particularly in Derry, and the cops started stopping parades and marches and civil rights were starting to show its head. People's Democracy were marching from Queens into the town, and you could feel the tension in the air.
Yeah, it just started to ramp up.
It really did, and yet I was still naive, and me and my friends, what's this about?
Yeah.
Now my parents were, particularly my mother's family, were fairly politically motivated, and there was something going on, or something happened, and I asked her. Not my father, because he was the same as me, and no interest in it at all. But if there was something happening and you wanted to find out, I'd have went to my mother, and she would have filled in the gaps.
Okay, yeah.
Or reasons in terms of what was going on a particular day, or why a set of things were happening.
Yeah.
And
were her brothers and sisters?
Well, she came from a big family. She came from a place in the bottom end of the Shankill Road, called Carrickhill.
Okay.
It's called Unity Flats now, and there was always sectarian trouble there in history. There was trouble there, and she was always very aware of the sectarianism in the place. But to be fair to her, she always tried to keep it. Whenever we were growing up, it was always kept away from us.
Like the way you said, you barely knew about it until
until
it kind of became a bit more
but
apparent.
with 67, 68, and then into 69, the tension was ratcheting up, unbelievable here, really was, and I was well warned by my parents and my brother's elder brother and sister not to be going out of the areas where you knew and you could trust.
Yeah.
And that fear of something happening to you was always there.
Always in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
And was this, we're still a little early when it comes to provisionals, but was there a sense of
there was no provisional IRA then,
Was there a sense of paramilitaries or any that sort of stuff? No.
Absolutely.
So it was just ramping up.
Just ramping up. Now there was always the history, but it was a historical view of the IRA being there.
We then moved into 1969, and I asked Jim if the nationalists in Northern Ireland supported the IRA and actually wanted them to protect them against the RUC and some loyalists.
Moving to 69, in August 69, when there was large-scale incursions by Protestant people and the RUC into areas, into the Falls Road from the Shankill.
Oh, and what do you mean? These are like Protestant people, like a displayed force, or like a protest saying?
No. This was large numbers of people with weapons.
Okay.
Coming into the like of Bombay Street and on down the Falls of Northumberland Street, where they were burning houses. The older people, the older generations were starting to say, where the hell is the IRA?
Yeah.
And it was IRA meant I ran away.
Yeah.
Was the term used. So there was Republicans there. Whenever that happened, were calling on people to join them and calling on them, or trying to organise people in the defence groups in the areas. But they got an awful hard time because they weren't there. And then the story started coming out was that that they had given up on armed struggle, and that all the weapons that they had that were to be used for defence were given over to the Free Welsh Army.
Just a quick side note here, the Free Welsh Army were a Welsh nationalist paramilitary organisation. They were formed in 1963, and their aim was to establish an independent Welsh country. The group were only active in the 60s and were not taken very seriously by the media. Some of their members did travel to Ireland to train with the IRA, and there are accounts of guns being sent from Ireland to Wales. But most of the accounts that I came across said that this was on a small scale. Now back to Jim. He explains how many Catholics under siege in Belfast perceived the IRA.
But it was the IRA in Belfast who were heavily criticised by the people of Belfast for not being there to save them from the attacks that happened.
By the RUC.
By the RUC and Protestants.
Moving in 69 or so.
Yes, August 69.
Yeah. And did you experience that yourself?
Oh yeah. At that stage, I was down down at Northumberland Street, where the Protestant mobs were coming down with RUC, and they were burning houses the whole way down. They were shooting onto the Falls Road, and they were throwing stones back at them. And one of the things that happened, there was Isaac News, if my memory serves me right, was a car showroom, a Mercedes car showroom on down the Falls Road, and I was helping me along with hundreds of others pushed the Mercedes and cars out of the showroom and burnt them in the middle of the Falls Road to form barricades to stop the cops coming into the areas. I think that's why anybody of a certain age, no matter how peaceful they are in terms of they come from a nationalist background, nationalist / Catholic background. I'm distinguishing between the two of them, and I'm distinguishing those two from Republican. I can understand Republicans having a view of the RUC, but ordinary nationalist Catholics had no axe to grind at that stage other than the normal of it. Yeah. But people of that age then I don't know anybody who would try to justify the actions of the RUC as they get on back then.
Yeah.
It was open warfare, and they were the enemy.
Yeah, well, what were they, 95% or 90% Protestant? You know, I think there was a Catholic.
There was.
But they got intimidated out of it at the start and during the Troubles as well, as the IRA kind of said. You know, they got pushed out of the way.
But there was always Catholics there
in the RUC.
In the RUC, yeah. I know several of them.
Okay.
I know several. There was two fellas that I knocked about with.
But these wouldn't be the ones now who walk up the Falls Road attacking.
No. They were people of my age who subsequently joined the
Yeah.
But back then, they were Protestant loyalists, and they viewed the Catholic population as rampant Republican who were there and who existed to try and do away with the northern state. The way that I would always have, from I grew up, I've viewed it is there's no difference between the way the nationalist Catholic population were treated as black people in South Africa. And they subjugated you in order to keep in control of the situation, because they felt that as soon as they lost that control, that was them beat. They would never be able to maintain that. And the population, in our case, the nationalist population, giving them equality meant that Protestants, Unionists were losing.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, look at the gerrymandering, look at the way the voting was, look at the way one house, one vote or something?
Yes, but you had to own a house.
Yeah, you had to own it. Yeah, so the odds of that are, 400 years
yes.
in the past have
and
contributed.
If you control the working population and the house allocation, Catholics didn't own very many houses.
Yeah.
There was a couple of occupations that Catholics could get into, and that was mostly around drink. The Republicans. That's why there's so many pubs in Belfast that were owned by Catholics. At that stage, people were put out of their houses. The homes were burnt, and there was schools opened up in order to provide accommodation for them.
Yeah, emergency accommodation. Yeah.
And all the school down beside where I lived was open, and there was families there, families from our down in North Belfast and from down the Falls, all staying in it. And I used to go around. It was only around the corner from me, and there was I used to go around and help make food and make sure there were.
And you lived at home with your family at this
Yeah,
time?
yeah.
So with a lot of you in the family? Or?
Six children in a 2-bedroom house, two up, two down.
And then you go over to the school and just help out?
And just help out.
Yeah.
Along with the rest of my friends, because at that stage tensions were at a height, and you know by doing that you thought that you were being involved in supporting your community, for want of a better expression. There was people in need, and you thought that you were doing right.
Yeah. And
that was at that stage. Then the politics started developing as well as the IRA started developing. I was involved with PD, People's Democracy, as was my wife Anne, and we went on. There was marches on every other day.
Yeah.
Protest marches of one sort or another. But along with that, the level of fear was tremendous. The tension in these areas was unbelievable, because you were waiting at any time for incursions of groups of Protestants.
Just to come into your area and
just slaughter people. I can't remember when it was. Peter Ward was a friend of mine. Tucker, his brother, Thomas, was in the same class. Peter was a couple of years older, but he'd been friendly with me. I would have called him a friend too. And he was a barman in the town, along with another big fella that I was friendly with, Richard Lappington. And they worked in a bar in a hotel in the town. Whenever they finished work, they went up to the Shankill Road for a drink after hours, and Protestant militia, UVF it was at that stage, killed Peter and tried to kill Richard.
Just while they're out having a drink?
Because they were Catholics. Yeah. That was, it was one of the initial assassinations.
And it was in a bar, it was in a pub?
They waited until they went out. Malvern Arms, if my memory serves me right.
And they obviously, it was so early on that for them going for a drink in the Shankill wasn't.
It was normal.
It was a
normal thing.
Yeah.
It was the barman finishing the drink, going to another bar, late bar. Bar stayed open late. They went there. Peter, as I say, got killed. And Richard, he was scarred all over his face. He got shot in the face.
Yeah.
And my understanding is Richard went to America after that. He couldn't take it. But at that stage, I'm saying we were, for that next couple of years, I was very involved in the civil rights and the PD.
Okay.
But that was all.
People's Democracy, or PD, was a political group that arose during the civil rights movement in Northern Ireland. They campaigned for civil rights in the Northern Irish government and wanted more radical reforms than the more commonly known civil rights group, NICRA or NICRA. They were a non-violent group.
The IRA had been approached a couple of times, the same as everybody else, but I wouldn't be involved.
So now you were approached on the street?
By people that I knew.
And they said, would you like to come in and join?
Yeah. You wouldn't have get in if you had any sort of a bad character.
They were very, very particular.
Very particular.
I found that a few times.
Very particular.
And if you did anything...
If you had any sort of a criminal record, you wouldn't. Yeah. I really wouldn't. They were very particular.
Yeah.
But I wasn't in the IRA up and in... So, before 71, August 71, which is the lead up to internment, I was, I'm saying I was heavily involved in the politics of the place, but it was in terms of marches and demonstrations about the inequality that was clear at that stage, what was happening within the nationalist community.
On your street,
it was just there, and it was blatant.
Jim explains that for a young nationalist in Northern Ireland, each and every one of them felt they had an obligation to campaign for their civil rights.
And to do nothing wasn't an option. Really wasn't an option. It was everybody was involved, in one way or another. So by July of '71, it became very clear that there was, the provisional IRA had developed, and were clearly the strongest paramilitary group. They were recruiting all over, and everywhere you went, there were in pubs and clubs, from ordinary show band dances. Everywhere you went, there was Republican music.
Really?
Every pub and club you went, and it was our anti-establishment movement or music, but it was, and that was through Republican songs.
Yeah.
So everybody was getting that fed into their psyche. There were the news on. Everybody was addicted to the news, and that was that they were being attacked somewhere in the north. There were attacks on a day and daily basis, and most of them were being either let happen or being orchestrated by the RUC.
Jim then began to talk about his first experiences getting arrested by the RUC and what led up to the beginning of internment.
So you get up to July, and I started getting arrested by the police, and I was arrested probably 8 or 9 times.
And is this they knock at your door? Or is this you're walking on the street, or you're on
anywhere at all? I mean, it was we didn't live here at the time. I wasn't married. It was still with my mother and father.
Yeah.
Don't forget, I was still 18, 19. And even the week before internment, I was arrested on the Sunday.
And because it was because of your activism in the two groups, or was it because you were a young fellow on the road? Or?
I'm assuming that it was because it was active in the PD and the civil rights. But it was, I was 18, 19. I was hardly a leader of anything.
So just literally a week before internment, you were arrested. And when they bring you in, was the RUC now? This is before internment, so would they be very heavy-handed or not so much?
Oh, you got the crap bit out of you.
Okay.
That was standard.
That was just the norm.
That was just the norm. You got the crap bit out of you.
So there's not much civil rights there at all, is there?
Absolutely.
There's no call a lawyer. Yeah, of course.
It really wasn't. It was you. That was standard. You knew you got arrested, and that was it. So I was arrested, held for 2 days, and let out. Now we subsequently realised that was a precursor for internment.
Yeah.
So the following week they did exactly the same thing.
Now, sorry. When you say that, what do you mean? So you realised that the week before was
a practice run for internment.
Okay. So they had their list already.
They had the list and all there. So on internment morning, I had gone myself and 4 or 5 of my friends. We'd gone to a party round the corner. And there was 2 RUC. There was an RUC man's 2 sisters at the party. We didn't know it at the time, and he was one of our friends. But we didn't know that he'd gone off and joined the RUC.
Yeah.
But we'd gone to the party, and I'd walked home from it. I was getting home. I'd left the guard home, and I was walking to my parents' house.
2 or 3 in the morning, maybe, or yeah,
3:30.
half
3 in the morning. That is when it was exactly, because I walked up the street towards my parents' house. The houses in Beachmount are in 2 halves, bottom half and top half. We lived at the beginning of the top half, and there's about 50 houses in each half. So I had walked up past the 50 houses, and the only light on the street came from my parents' home at 3:30 in the morning. It was a Sunday night, Monday morning, and I couldn't understand why the light was on.
Yeah, they wouldn't wake up for
They
you.
wouldn't wait. So, and I got to the door of the house, and a rifle was produced out the letterbox, and either side of me in the gardens next, in my own mother's garden, and the garden next to me, there was soldiers stood up with rifles all pointing at me.
Okay, so sorry, let's just bring it back. So then you find yourself surrounded by 3 soldiers with guns pointed at you.
Half a dozen soldiers, because I looked round and they'd come from across the street as well. I didn't know what was happening.
Yeah.
And they were all paratroopers. Bastards.
Could you tell the difference?
Yeah, the berries.
Very still.
Berries. And they had stopped me, and they were well known for being really heavy-handed.
Well, that's what they were trained for.
Yeah.
You know,
When you get lifted with the paras, you knew you were going to get a beating, a real hard beating.
but if you got lifted by the RUC, you know the same thing.
Yeah. So, guy opened the door. It was an officer, and I was brought into the house. And who are you? Name and what are you doing? I'm Jim Auld. What's your date of birth? The normal questioning about your identity, and I knew that I was getting by what he was asking me. I knew that I was getting arrested, and I remember saying I took my jacket off to my parents who were in the living room, who had got out of bed, and my brothers and sisters, and I showed them. I said, "There's no marks on me, no bruising, no nothing. So if I come back, when I'm released, if I come back, there's any marks on me, it's his fault." And he was a captain in of the Paras that were there. And he turned to my mother and said, "I can assure you, Mrs. Auld, when your son's in my custody, nothing will happen to him." So I was arrested, and I was taken out of the house and marched back down the street with a rifle at the back of my head and soldiers on either side of me pointing their guns at me. And
wearing handcuffs or wearing
no,
sometimes or
no.
not?
Half a dozen rifles
Yeah,
at my head.
That'd be enough.
Sort of puts the handcuffs into perspective.
Yeah, you're not going to pull a runner, are you?
So I marched down out onto the Falls Road, and there was an army lorry, and I was put into the back there and sat for 20 minutes, half an hour, and there was another guy came, and he came in exactly the same position, and I knew his name, but I can't remember it now. Big red-haired fella who was in, he was one of the communist groups, ICO, the Irish Communist Organisation. The Irish Communist Organisation.
Okay,
it was. And he said to me, "You know what this is?" And I said, "Well, I think it's internment." And he said, "Yeah, you're right." He was older than me. He was a guy in his 30s.
Okay, yeah.
So he was at that stage. Nice big guy, and we were driven to over to North Belfast into Girdwood, and he was taken out, and I was kept back. He was taken away, and then the captain came to the back of the lorry that I was in, and he said, I've told your mother that nothing would happen to you while you were in my custody. You're now no longer in my custody. And I got booted out of the back of the truck. So it did. And it was manhandled. It was only manhandled and brought into a room, big room, and there was loads of people, army and cops standing about, and there was a few people sitting on the ground, wooden floor, and I was left sitting there for half an hour, and name was called, and hand up and lifted up and brought into a room and verified all the details of me, and sent me, 2 soldiers grabbed me and brought me out on rough ground, to 2 lines of soldiers with dogs and battens and lumps of wood. And they were but this far apart, the 2 walls, 12 feet apart, and pushed into it. And as I was pushed, the dogs were trying to snap at me, and I was moving the screen, getting out, trying to get out of the way. And as that was happening, I was getting battered with the battens and lumps of wood. And I was made to run down by 30 soldiers. I was made to run down between them, and getting battered until I got to the end of it. And they were all laughing and joking. So they were. And at the end of it, 2 soldiers that had walked around the back of them and picked me up at the far side. And they walked me to a hole in a wall. And I mean a hole in a wall. It was a stone wall, a high wall. I didn't know where it was. But when I went through the hole in the wall, there was a screw there, prison officer. So, and it was into the back end of Crumlin Road Jail.
Okay.
And I was brought along, and I was put into a cell in Crumlin Road Jail. And I was left there. A couple of hours after that, there was another guy brought in, a guy from Ardoyne, and I was going to say an elderly man, about 50. And he was in an awful state, and he was talking. He was getting out because he wasn't involved in anything. And I said, I don't know whether I'm getting out. I've got your name and address, and I know his name, okay. I remember it. Yeah. But I said, if I get out, or when I get out, I'll go to your house and tell them that you're okay. Yeah. If you do the same for me. And literally an hour or so after that, he got called and he got taken out of the cell. I didn't know where he went. And an hour or so after that, same thing, I get called. And I get called, and 2 screw brought me down to the hole in the wall again. There was 2 cops there, 2 soldiers there, and I had to go back through the lines of soldiers, back in and into a small room where it was made to sit in a corridor. And there was 2 other fellas there, and another guy came 15-20 minutes later, and that was the other 3 there was Joe Clark, Francie McGuigan, and Kevin Hanaway. All people that I knew. Joe Clark I went to school with, and Francie and Kevin, well-known people from the road. Yeah. And sorry, I forgot it. But when it was before that, when I was brought into that room, I was brought into, I was put on the camp bed. a very small cot bed on the ground. It was a military one. It was military green wood, and I was lay on the bed and handcuffed the centre bits of it, where it folded up.
Yeah.
So there was gaps in it. There was handcuffs on either side of it, and I was lying there. There was half a dozen soldiers, and there was a cop, ginger-haired cop. RUC.
Yeah.
4162
You remember
was his number. I'll never forget that bastard. And he started trying to be a smart ass. You wouldn't work, and there's not a day's work in you, and you'll take the Queen's shilling, and but all you're trying to do is undermine the crown and all sectarian shit.
Yeah.
And I was well known for having the smart ass mouth anyway, so I give him as good as he was trying to give, and the cops were laughing at him. So not the cops, the soldiers were laughing at him. He lost it, and he battered me, and then the soldiers battered me because I started on them as well, and I couldn't defend myself. Hands handcuffed to the side, and of course, being good guys, all they were aiming for was my genitals.
Yeah, and just punching, kicking, or with their guns, with their clubs.
They're kicking, stamping, and battering my genitals and face and body, just punches and kicks, and I couldn't do anything. Just lay there. Yeah. And the guy, one of the cop lost it completely. So he did, and I at that stage I wasn't giving in to him, and I says, I never took a shilling off the bitch in my life, and I says, she can stick her money up her hole. And he went at me again, and the Brit that attacked me first stopped him and pulled him out of the way.
The soldier?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pulled the cop out of the way. And he released the handcuffs and brought me into another room and gave me a cigarette, a number 6 cigarette. Never forget it. And he says, "Here, you poor bastard, you're going to need that." And he gave me a cigarette. He gave me a cigarette sitting on a seat. As soon as I finished the cigarette, then they moved me to another room, to this corridor where Joe and Francie and Kevin was. And we were sitting there, and a cop, well-known special branch man, Harry Taylor. Everybody knew who Harry Taylor was. Born again Christian. He was. That's what he told him about.
The repent and all this sort of stuff.
Oh, gee, an animal.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, don't you worry, man. I've got something special for you."
It's at this point where Jim's experience of internment deviates from most of the other detainees. Jim was one of 12, with 2 later additions bringing the total to 14, who was selected for deep interrogation. It's unclear exactly why Jim was selected. It may have been his involvement in the People's Democracy, but it began with a hood being slipped over his head.
And taken into a room, and details again of who you were, and hood over my head. And out along, and we're obviously about 5-6 minutes walking, getting trailed again, and put onto a helicopter. Now, I can tell you that the 3 or 4 weeks previous to that night, I had been in a dentist, and while I was waiting to see the dentist, I'd been reading a magazine, Times magazine. I can tell you that. Times magazine, and I went through it, and there was a double spread in this magazine, and there were 4 or 5 helicopters in the air, Vietnam, and they were over water, flying over water. And in the middle of it, there was a red circle. And the red circle, inside the red circle was a body that had been thrown out of the helicopter. So I took off, and now I'm telling you that just because we're coming to that part of it.
So you now, from what you gathered, I guess you were in the helicopter with those three friends.
Yeah, well,
do you know it?
I really had no idea whether they were with me. All I know was I was handcuffed to somebody. But get into the helicopter, and I took off. We were in the air about 30 minutes at this stage. And the door of the helicopter opened, and I was pulled to the air, to the front, the side of the helicopter. Wind was blowing in, and this picture went through my head.
Yeah.
Because I thought at that stage that's what was going to happen. And I got a boot in the back.
Did they say anything to you?
Not a word. Not a word. I was kneeling in front of the door, open helicopter, and I got a boot in the back.
Jim had no way of knowing how high off the ground he was, and in the instant he was pushed, he believed that he was falling to his death.
And I thought I was out the helicopter. So it was, or out into the air. And I got half a squeal out, and I hit the ground. As I hit the ground, I get lifted on either side, and I was charged. I was run by two people, one on either side of me, and I was run straight into that with the hood on.
Yeah.
Just straight in, and I was bang. I could feel the blood running down my face. I was squealing again. Not a word said, just lifted up and brought into a room. Hood taken up, stripped, a boiler suit on, and a doctor, guy in a white coat, stethoscope, checked me out.
Jim's health was checked, from what I can only assume, as to ensure that he was fit and healthy so that his body could survive what he was about to experience over the next few days.
I was brought into a room and put up against the wall. And gee, thank God. I was against the wall. And I was left there. And I was, thank God that's over. And I was left. And I was left. And after, I was happy enough with it, but
you were standing against
the wall,
with your hands on the wall.
On the wall.
Okay, with the hood on, so you don't have the hood on.
No.
Okay.
Another source that will be referenced in this episode is the RTE documentary, The Torture Files. And the men in that documentary described what it was like leaning against the wall. You spread your legs and then put all the weight on your toes as you leaned with your arms up above your head against the wall. It was quite a difficult position to maintain. This was one of what has become known as the 5 techniques. The 5 techniques are sleep deprivation, stress positions, deprivation of food and drink, subjection to noise, and hooding. The British Army believed that these deep interrogation techniques would help get them the answers they wanted, but to many, this amounted to torture. Now, back to Jim.
And I'm saying I was left after 15, 20 minutes or so, took my hand down to shake it because no blood circulation.
Yeah.
So it was. And and as soon as I took my hand off the wall, I got battered. Battens on the back, fell to the ground, battened while I was on the ground, booted on the ground for 2 or 3 minutes, and then 2 people up and back onto the wall, and somebody's hand pressing against the back of my hand, indicating keep your hand on the wall. Okay, I get it. So I'm like that, and stayed up a bit longer. But your arms go numb. There's no circulation. You try and hold your hands up in the air for a while, your hands go numb, and you have to, flex them to try and get them. See, as soon as you did that, battened again, battened until you were down and you were squealing, and back up and onto the wall.
So you never really get time to.
You can't. You moved your finger, and it was clear there was 2 people standing behind you.
Yeah.
And if their job was watching you, and if you moved your fingers, you get battened.
So you realise this wasn't just them having you in a holding area or whatever. This is one of the things they're doing to you.
To be truthful, I didn't. No. As far as I was concerned, my world had collapsed down into this situation where I couldn't move. That was my whole world.
Yeah.
And I was saying, what the fuck do I do here? I can't stay on this because my arms are falling by themselves, and I'm going to get a battering. Well, you see, after a while, see when getting battered on the ground, and the pins and needles, after a while, your whole body, it wasn't just your arms, it was your whole body was numb.
From having to stand so still, it's tense. Yeah, absolutely.
And you see the getting beaten with the battens, it wasn't so bad, because when they were beating you doing that, they were circulating the blood, and you were getting some sort of release. So at that time you were just dropping, and they were beating you onto the ground, but you were lying there because you got some sort of
It's
relief.
like taking a bit of a break.
Yeah, getting the beating. Yeah. And you were put back up. Now, at that stage, there was a noise in the background, and it was annoying. But that's all it was.
Yeah.
Annoying.
So I hear it was described like a Hoover or something, wasn't it? It was a buzzing or a hissing.
Yeah, hissing sound.
Air coming out of a tire or something. Yeah.
But it was just in the background. For me, it was just in the background, and it was a bit annoying. And that went on. At one stage,
While you're in this position. Okay.
At one stage, I fell. Couldn't take it any longer. I just went down, and I was battered, but I wasn't put back up on the wall. I was taken along a corridor, and into a room, sat down on a hard seat, and the hood taken off up the top of my head. 2 guys and 2 bright lights shining into my eyes, and it was farcical, because it looked as if it was an American cop thing, with the 2 cops interrogating you.
Yeah.
And it was so amateurish that you said, what the fuck? And he said, who do you know in the IRA? I said, don't know anybody in the IRA. Hood down, battered over the head, and trailed away and put back up.
One question.
That was it. And that went on. That went on for 7 days, 7 nights. At one stage...
7 days, sorry, so every day was were you put in a holding cell, or were you put in these stress positions for 7 days?
That was it.
All day long?
All day and all night.
No sleep?
None whatsoever. Right, well, I'll go on and explain.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Because I was, at one stage, they trailed me off the wall and sat me down on the ground. And now, I'm talking 2, 3, 4 days into this. And they sat me down, and they lifted the hood to there, just below between my lip and my nose. And somebody pushed a bit of dry bread into my mouth. And I spattered out, because I thought they were trying to kill me.
Yeah.
there was no saliva, no nothing in my mouth. My mouth was like a sandpit.
Yeah, it's true.
And to put dry bread into my mouth would have killed me.
Yeah.
Couldn't have taken it at all. I spat it out, and they whenever it spat it out, they put a tin cup to my mouth, and they give me one sip of water, and they put the hood down and put me back on the wall. It was about after that I started hallucinating and dreaming. And at one stage I said to myself, this is a dream. This cannot be happening. This is a dream. I must be dreaming. And the hood, I was saying, this is the blanket has gone up over my head, and I have to take it off, and that's all I have to do is to break this. So I took the hood off, which I thought was the blanket was coming down off my head, and turned around. And there was a big, tall Asian guy in a check shirt and a pair of jeans, standing about 10 feet away from me.
So not a soldier, not RUC, not...
No. He was about 10 feet away from me. And I looked at him and he looked at me and I said, fuck me, I'm not dreaming. And I done that, I put my hand up and I put the hood back down again.
So the soldiers didn't go for you when they saw you, or they weren't there at the time?
No, well, at that stage, I stood back onto the wall, and I was there for 15 seconds and I got a pattern. And it could have been around the back of me or somewhere else, but I didn't see him.
Yeah, you just saw the one fella, yeah.
And he was in shock. I'm sure he was in shock because I did it and he wasn't expecting it.
Yeah.
But I was there. Now, that convinced me that I wasn't getting out. That the fact that I had seen him and I was trying to rationalize it, what was happening, why and where and what was going to happen. And all I could say was to myself was, I'm not getting out of here alive.
Or were you thinking that I've been wrong? They obviously think I'm someone else. Or
No, I wasn't thinking. I was what was in my head was the British government couldn't allow me out of here alive to tell everybody what they had done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if I tell the people, it goes into the papers what they're doing to me, they couldn't survive it.
Yeah.
Because it was so horrible, it was so bad.
Jim fixated on this and started to think that the best solution was to take his own life.
And you see, whenever I had anytime I had fallen, the building that I was in was an old building because it had old school buildings and the pipes, the heating pipes along the bottom of the wall.
Yeah.
You know the pipes, about 2-inch pipes,
yeah.
all along right. Well, where I was, whenever I was falling, and I could feel that on the ground.
And you never saw another guy.
No.
With you, so you were all assigned.
No, that was
Jeez, okay.
So whenever I saw that, I said, look, there's no point in me suffering this anymore, because I know that they're going to kill me anyway. So I might as well do it myself. And I said, will I do it or will I not? And I said, yeah, because this is going on and this can only end the one way. And I threw myself down onto the ground, hoping that I would break my neck on the pipe on the bottom of the ground. And all I did was hurt myself. Yeah. And I lay on the ground crying because I didn't kill myself. And as I was laying on the ground crying, they beat me again. And they beat me and they put me back up onto the wall.
7 days on the wall.
Yeah. Another time, It was a dream, hallucination. I thought that I was at sea and I was looking out of the deck on the ship, on the out through the glass, and there was people on either side of me. You'll forgive the mess. It was messed up because I was saying there were sailors on either side of me, and the one on the left hand side of me was, in my head, I was saying, this fucker's coming to attention. But that's not the command. He was standing at ease. Everybody, so his foot was coming out, and every time his foot was coming out, it was landing on my foot, and I said, "Fuck this!" And I was standing there, and it happened 3 or 4 times until he really hurt me, and I lost my temper. This is me looking out to sea.
Okay, was he really stepping on your foot? Was it someone?
Well, that's the whole point of it.
Okay,
the last time he did it, he really hurt me, and I did that thinking that it was this sailor that was doing this, and he was stopping me, and I heard a grunt, and I'm saying, and I don't know whether it was a hallucination or whether I was standing up, sleeping, and having a nightmare of this situation. But that's what happened. Now, whenever I get back to Crumlin Road Jail, after it was over, I had no toenails in that foot. They were all cracked.
Okay, so
he was standing on my foot.
But in your head, it was a
hallucination. Yeah. So, and there was another couple of times I was taken off the wall and I was brought into this interrogation. And the last one was, people in the IRA. Who do you know in the IRA? And I said, the only names I know in the IRA were Sean McStiffen and somebody else.
But they're just big names.
They were just big names. Yeah. The only ones I know in the IRA. And it was the same thing. Hood down, battered, and put on the wall again.
And is this so?
And so it was, that went on. It went on, but it's. I see as that was going on, the noise in the room got louder and louder and louder until it took over, and it was designed, as the rest of it was, to stop you from thinking. It interrupted your ability to think and to process thoughts, because it just took over your whole head. I'm talking unbearable.
Jim also talked about a BBC programme, of which I couldn't find online, called The Burke Special, where individuals on the show were subjected to noise like this. The most anyone could stand was 2 minutes. Jim experienced this for days.
No food, no water, no nothing, and the beatings. And the beatings are, it's funny with the beatings because the beatings was never taken as an integral part of it.
Yeah, well,
there was the 5 techniques they said, and that was without the beatings. But the beatings were for me, were an integral part of it, because the beatings were designed to break your will to withstand what was happening. It was all part of it, as the hood, the noise,
the stress of standing,
and the food and water. All part of a single system designed to break your will.
That had been written up and used in Kenya.
Yes, all over. Yeah. So, and that's now, on the last day, I was taken off the wall and I was put into a room where there was a mattress on the ground, and this guy sat me down on and then left me. And I fell asleep with the hood on.
Yeah.
And this guy came in, Ballymena, Northampton accent, His face is sitting there. If I see him anywhere, I'll kill him. And he took the hood off and said to me, "You should have taken that hood off. There's no need for you to be wearing that now. It's all over." And he said, "Do you want a Coke or something to drink?" And he gave me a Coke, tin of Coca-Cola. And he said, "You could be telling me to wash. Do you want to wash yourself?" And I couldn't lift my hands.
Yeah, you were completely.
And he had to wash me. Now don't forget, there was no toilets. No going out to the loo.
Yeah, so you're
Stinking
Yeah.
completely. And he washed me down. So he said,
to make you presentable, or what's this?
"It's bring you back into the world. Bring you back. If he had left us there, they'd left, you wouldn't have been able to stand it. Plus, they wouldn't have been able to explain it.
Yeah.
So getting you presentable was bringing you back into reality. So that served their two purposes. Now, the only thing that he kept saying to me is, "You know that I didn't do anything on you. Aren't you sure I didn't do anything on you?"
You see.
Yeah. Well, he was plain clothes from that, but he was branch okay. So what he was doing to me was trying to convince me that he was a good guy.
Yeah. So
Because
it's
he
like
was,
yeah.
and it was about reinforcing I couldn't bear witness against him because I didn't do anything on him. He didn't do anything on me. And I'm quite sure that the rest of them did the same thing with the other people there. And it was just that he's yours to take off and he's yours to bring back, and he's, so they were distancing themselves without, so he obviously didn't interrogate me. There was others, and those others then went to the rest of the people that were there. And he eventually says, "You're going back to Crumlin Road in a way. You just sit there, you have a sleep, do what you want, and I'll tell you what's going to happen whenever you're getting back. But you're getting back in the helicopter, and I'm only going to put the hood on while you're in the helicopter for your own safety. And when you're getting off the helicopter, I'm going to take the hood off, and I just want you to walk straight and away from the helicopter, and there'll be somebody there for you to walk to."
And could you think straight when you say all this? Do you know the noise has been in your ears for 4 days? How are you going to process anything in a long time? Yeah. And that's what happened then.
And that's exactly what happened. He came into the room, put the hood back on, and took me out, handcuffed me, and took me out to the helicopter, back on the helicopter, and back to Crumlin Road jail. And he did. He sat me down, and I was able to put my feet down under the ground. He pulled the hood off and pushed me forward, and there was a screw standing 20, 30 yards away from me. And I think that what made it worse for me was the expression on the screw's face, the sheer horror on his face
of how you look,
of how I looked. I think frightened me more. Because you could see, and that's all it was, sheer horror on his face. It was just black and blue.
This brings us to the end of this part of Jim's story. The second part will be released later this month. Just a reminder that you can hear the entire interview right now over at patreon.com/The Troubles Podcast. Also, if you enjoy this podcast and would like to support what I do, you can buy me a virtual coffee over at buymeacoffee.com/Troubles Podcast. If you'd like to support the podcast in other ways, you can leave a review or simply tell your friends. Everything helps. Thanks, and see you next time.